Heroes on the Homefront series, too. Have a great weekend. I'm Harris. Here's Shannon.
Paul Manafort being sent to jail. A federal judge revoking his bail after new charges of attempted witness tampering. Hello, everyone. I'm Shannon Bream in today for Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. The former Trump campaign chairman taken into custody after accusations that he tried to contact witnesses in one of the federal cases against him. Manafort is facing 2 trials on charges that include money laundering, tax evasion, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Fox Live team coverage today. Peter Doocy at the White House, but we begin with Doug McKelway at U.S. District Court live in Washington. All right, Doug, describe the scene for us in the courtroom as that bail was revoked.
Well, Shannon, after Judge Amy Berman Jackson announced that she was going to be revoking the bail of Paul Manafort, Mr. Manafort stood motionless. There were no overt signs of emotion. He was surrounded by 3 U.S. Marshals who took him to an adjoining room. Moments later, one of those U.S. Marshals returned and handed to Mrs. Manafort her husband's tie, his maroon tie, his belt, and his wallet. It is unclear where Mr. Manafort will be incarcerated. He is undergoing processing into the federal prison system as we understand it right now. It's unlikely that he will be held in the D.C. jail, which is generally reserved for local prisoners. There is a minimum security federal prison in nearby Pennsylvania. Obviously, his defense lawyers would like for him to be nearby so they can better prepare for his defense at his upcoming trial here in D.C. in middle September. In revoking Mr. Manafort's bond, Judge Jackson said this. She said that she struggled with the decision. She said she could not turn a blind eye to the allegations if these allegations prove true. She said it shows obvious intent towards witness tampering when he was ordered not to do so. And she chastised Manafort's filings in court last Friday. He's been treating this whole thing as just another marketing exercise, as she said. And that's basically what led to his being revoked, having his bond revoked at this point. A stunning, stunning development. Shannon, back to you.
All right, Doug, so can you tell us more about the details of charges of alleged witness tampering? I mean, that certainly seems to be the biggest problem for him now and what likely led to today.
Yeah, it sure is. Here's the gist of what that's all about. For a 5-week period, beginning in February of 2018, Manafort is alleged to have called or texted or made some sort of communications through encrypted devices with 2 members of what is called the Habsburg Group. Now, this is a European lobbying group whose mission is to promote two U.S. politicians, Ukrainian politicians with close ties to the Kremlin. Read into that former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych, who is very, very close to the Kremlin and to Mr. Putin. The government said today that Mr. Manafort made several calls to one man with the Habsburg Group while that man was on holiday in Italy. He apparently did not pick up the first phone call from Manafort. He picked up a second call but was unable to identify where the phone call had come from. He asked, "Who is this?" Manafort said, "It's Paul." Described to him that he wanted some favors done. The man then hung up the phone call and alerted authorities. Mrs. Manafort made no statement at all today upon leaving the courtroom with his attorney, but she must be stunned. Recall that this entire event for her began when she was awakened in the middle of the night in her bed, in her bedroom, by FBI agents, and it ended today with U.S. Marshals handing over her husband's tie, wallet, and belt. Shannon, back to you.
All right, Doug McKelway live on the scene at the courthouse for us. Thank you. Well, President Trump just weighing in on Paul Manafort's legal troubles in a new tweet. Earlier, the president dropped in on Fox and Friends on the White House lawn for what turned into an almost hour-long interview of sorts. Peter Doocy was there. All right, Peter, has President Trump been talking a lot about a pardon for his former campaign chairman? You know that topic's likely to come up.
I asked the president about a possible pardon for Manafort this morning. He said he did not want to talk about it. But now that the sentence has come down, we do have a tweet where the president says, "Wow, what a tough sentence for Paul Manafort, who has represented Ronald Reagan, Bob Dole, and many other top political people and campaigns. Didn't know Manafort was the head of the mob. What about Comey and Crooked Hillary and all the others? Very unfair." The president also, at a gaggle after that half-an-hour-long interview this morning, discussed Manafort's general situation at length.
I feel a little badly about it. They went back 12 years to get things that he did 12 years ago. You know, Paul Manafort worked for me for a very short period of time. He worked for Ronald Reagan. He worked for Bob Dole. He worked for John McCain, or his firm did. He worked for many other Republicans.
So President Trump does not think that it's fair for Manafort to be ensnared for non-election tampering offenses by investigators who are said to be investigating possible election tampering.
Okay, so Peter, what does the president think about the Inspector General's report? He's had a lot to say.
He's using its findings as an excuse to call James Comey, the former FBI director, the scum at the top of the FBI.
Now, here's the good news. I did nothing wrong. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction. The IG report yesterday went a long way to show that. And I think that the Mueller investigation has been totally discredited.
Now, by comparing the Mueller probe to the Inspector General's report on the Clinton email investigation, President Trump is doing something that Democratic lawmakers said they feared.
So what does this all mean going forward? We know that in the days ahead, the president and his allies will try to twist themselves into pretzels and try to use this report to undermine the special counsel and the Russia probe. Unfortunately for them, nothing in this report lays a glove on special counsel Mueller or the ongoing Russia probe.
The president also said again today he would like to talk to Mueller if he had the opportunity, but he thinks that the special counsel's office is too biased against him. Shannon.
All right, Peter Doocy live at the White House. Thank you. For more on Paul Manafort's growing legal troubles, let's bring in Paul Rosenzweig, a former senior counsel in the Ken Starr investigation of President Clinton and senior fellow at R Street Institute. Paul, great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so he's led away. His personal effects are taken away. What is life going to be like for him now as he awaits trial?
Well, it's not going to be as comfortable as it was beforehand. Jail is not a pleasant place to be, and it's pretty likely that they'll keep him somewhere nearby and not in one of the club-fed prisons up in Pennsylvania. So if I'm Paul Manafort, I'm looking at a difficult transition in life, at least for the next few days.
So obviously, none of the crimes that he's charged with have any direct connection to the campaign, although a lot of folks want to muddy the waters about that. To be clear, these aren't tied to anything dealing with the campaign. But the president is doing his best to distance himself a little bit from Mr. Manafort. Here's what he had to say when asked about this morning before the bail was revoked.
He worked for me, what, for 49 days or something? A very short period of time. I feel badly for some people because they've gone back 12 years to find things about somebody, and I don't think it's right.
Okay, so only a short amount of time on the campaign, but now he's behind bars. He's going to be sitting there and have a lot of time to think about this. Is there a chance he has anything that would be helpful to Mueller and the investigators?
Well, that's the $64,000 question, isn't it? It's clear that this effort to put Manafort in jail was an effort to ramp up the pressure on him. So to the extent that he does have something, now is the time he's going to be asked to come forward, because now is when the reality of his situation is being brought forth to him. If he has nothing to trade, if he continues to fight, he's looking at spending the rest of his life in jail, and that can't be uncomfortable for him. So I don't know what Manafort knows. Nobody does. But if there is something in his past that is relevant to President Trump's campaign and the allegations of Russian collusion, now is likely the time he's going to come forward with it, unless, of course, the president pardons him.
Well, and the president has said, though, there's nothing he can give up on him because he did nothing wrong. There was no collusion. So he feels confident, whether it's Manafort or Michael Cohen or other people close to him, when the screws are put to them by these different investigations, he says that's fine. He feels badly for them, but there's nothing that would impact him.
If that's really the case, if we accept that as true, then it really is an unfortunate thing to have been in the president's orbit in the last year, because there are half dozen people, Manafort, Cohen, who are now facing significant jail time for other unrelated criminal acts that they probably, there's a lot of substance to some of the allegations against them, it would not have come to light but for the fact that they chose to throw in with the president. And so they're going to be in a very difficult situation, under scrutiny, but without anything to share.
Yeah, and he sounds like he is gravely concerned about a number of those people because of the connection that's now brought them to this place. I want to talk to you about the Inspector General's report as well. Peter Strzok, one of the FBI agents, we see new text from him we hadn't seen before. This one about the president said Trump's not going to become the the president, quote, will stop it, that kind of thing. And while the ultimate conclusion of the report was that the political bias of the people involved didn't impact their decisions in the Hillary Clinton email investigation, it seemed that the IG left the door open with respect to the Russia part of this, saying this in part: we did not have confidence that Strzok's decision to prioritize the Russia investigation over following up on the mid-year related investigation, that's the Hillary Clinton one, discovered on the Wiener laptop, all the emails they found, was free from bias. So they're saying when it came to the Russia investigation, we're not jumping in and making a decision about whether that part of that's free of bias. And of course, that's still pending.
Well, if today's results for Manafort were a bad day for the president, yesterday's OIG report was a good day for the president. For one thing, as you've said, it does describe what at a minimum is gross lack of professionalism on the part of more than one FBI employee. We've now got 3 agents and 2 attorneys who are exchanging private emails reflecting their personal feelings with respect to the president. And there's the natural thought that some of that infected their ability to conduct the investigation free from bias. Layer on top of that the IG's conclusions that Jim Comey's actions were extraordinary and insubordinate, and the president's decision to fire Comey actually looks a little better now, right? I mean, if he was firing an insubordinate subordinate.
And if that factors into whether Mueller is considering obstruction charges against him, he can now point to this IG report and say even they think that he went rogue on a number of things, and they were not very flattering in their assessment of Mr. Comey as FBI director. There is a new one now, Christopher Wray. We'll see how he does. Paul Rosenzweig, thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
All right, President Trump putting the squeeze on China with new tariffs. So how will China respond? Plus, President Trump considering a face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin this summer. Michael Allen joins us. Rise between the two nations. China now vowing to match them. President Trump enacting a 25% tariff on $50 billion in goods, set to go into effect July 6th. Now, on the list, about 1,100 products mostly used in machinery, as the White House reviews a second list of products for new tariffs. The president weighed in earlier on a possible trade war.
There is no trade war. They've taken so much. So last year, $375 billion in trade deficit. We had a 300 with China. We had overall over $800 billion over a period of years. Each year, close to $800 billion in losses on trade. Not going to happen anymore. It's not going to happen. Can't happen.
I'm joined now by Michael Allen of Beacon Global Strategies and former member of the National Security Council. Great to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Okay, so what do you make of this? Because China said, listen, whatever you give us, it's coming back at you. We're going to retaliate. They have said that this president is damaging. He's undermining the world global trade situation as it is. But this guy's a disruptor. He told us all through the campaign, this is exactly what he was going to do.
He told us he was going to do this. And as you know, China's got this plan to overtake the United States in sort of military critical technology. And so we all sort of agree that this is a big problem. The United States has to do something. Trump's formulation to get leverage over the Chinese is to do more tariffs. I mean, we could try something else, but this is the way the president is going after it. And so he hopes to get some leverage over them so that we might have real negotiations later.
Okay, and there are real people at the end of this, because now China says we're going to go after the people who love you, the heartland, the farmers, the Midwest. Right. It's going to hurt somebody in the long run. We've got some polling. Monmouth poll asked about how do you think the tariffs are going to impact the U.S. economy. 25% did say they think it's going to help, but a much larger number, 40%, at least their perception is it's going to hurt us.
I think they're right, because as they put tariffs on soybeans and other farmers in the Midwest, it may cause us more jobs in the long run. President Bush tried some tariffs early on, and I think the reports came back many years later that, you know what, you ended up costing us more jobs than you saved in this little instance. So we've got to be careful. The president's got to play it right. He does have the cushion of an amazingly strong economy, which probably gives him a little bit more confidence to try this. But yeah, he's got to watch it here.
Okay, so let's talk about this possible meeting now between the president and Vladimir Putin. Here is what he said about the possibility that they will meet this summer.
Are you planning to meet with Putin this summer?
It's possible that we'll meet, yeah. And I thought, this all started because one of you asked, should Putin be in the G7? I said, no, he should be in the G8. A few years ago, Putin was in what was called the G8. I think it's better to have Russia in than to have Russia out, because just like North Korea, just like somebody else, it's much better if we get along with them than if we don't.
Now, my understanding of what he was saying about the G8 was, listen, Russia is intertwined with everything we have to talk about, from Syria to the Middle East to North Korea, everything else. So if they're not at the table, what good are our discussions? That seemed to be, to me, my interpretation of what he was saying there. What do you think?
No, I think so. He knows about Syria and Ukraine, and I think he's making the calculations. Like you say, better to have him at the table. I don't know if we're all there yet because of the Russian behavior across the board in the Middle East. They are trying to thwart the United States everywhere we go. But I get it. He's the president. He's got to maintain the big picture in mind. And so he's trying to salvage some sort of a relationship with Russia, even as the Congress and others are aggressively going after him.
When you look back on things, including Crimea, Ukraine, I mean, there are serious issues. And as you said, it's basically a proxy war when it comes to Syria and a lot of what's going on in the Middle East. The president says, yeah, I may sit down and talk with this guy, but he's also, the U.S. has been tough. I mean, the sanctions that have been levied, there are things that are going on that maybe don't get in the headlines every day, but it's sort of a schizophrenic relationship.
It really is. And I don't see it getting better anytime soon. But that is the irony. Trump has put on serious sanctions against the Russians, arguably more than President Obama. I think definitely more than President Obama. But because the president seems like he's ready to meet, he sort of sends these conflicting messages, as you say, and so some of that gets trampled over. But I think he's being tough on Russia. I don't know if I'm ready to let him back in the G7, but I get what he's trying to do. He wants to maintain a little bit of a conversation.
He seems to like both the carrots and the sticks in dealing with these guys. All right, Mike Allen, thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks so much.
Great to see you.
Good
All right, the Taliban leader behind the attack on activist Malala killed in a drone strike. What his death could mean for a new peace treaty with the Taliban. Plus, cyber attackers putting a bullseye on Singapore earlier this week as President Trump sat down there with Kim Jong-un. Not surprising. We're going to tell you who was behind all those hack attacks. Confirming the death of Pakistan Taliban chief Mullah Fazlullah. The senior terror leaders believe behind a number of deadly attacks in the region, including the shooting of Nobel Peace Prize winner Malala, who was left for dead back in 2012. And it's all because she simply wanted to go to school. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin is live at the Pentagon with this story. Hello, Jennifer.
Hi, Shannon. Well, a senior U.S. official tells Fox American troops have not yet been able to make positive identification on the ground following the drone strike because the missile completely destroyed the vehicle the Taliban leader was traveling in. Just moments ago, Afghanistan's president confirmed the Taliban leader's death in a tweet, and relatives of the wanted leader have already begun public mourning rituals. The drone strike took place Wednesday, 2 days before the Muslim Eid holiday in eastern Afghanistan's Kunar province, close to the border with Pakistan. The State Department had a $5 million bounty on the head of Maulana Fazlullah and had designated him a global terrorist as head of the Pakistan Taliban, which maintains ties with al-Qaeda. Fazlullah helped plan the failed bomb attack in New York's Times Square in 2010. In December 2014, Fazlullah's operatives carried out the most lethal terrorist attack in Pakistani history when its operatives killed 151 people, including more than 130 children, during an attack against a military school in Peshawar, Pakistan. That's where many of Pakistan's top generals sent their children. He also was responsible for the botched assassination attempt of Malala Yousafzai, the young Pakistani girl who received a Nobel Prize for her advocacy for female education. She spoke in late March, having just returned to Pakistan for the first time since she was shot by the Taliban 6 years ago.
It has been the most beautiful day of my life. This has been the most important thing in my life. And I had never been so excited for anything. I had never been so happy before.
The drone strike comes as Afghanistan's Taliban chief repeated his demand for direct talks with the United States before negotiating with the Afghan government. Until now, Washington has refused. The Afghan government announced a 9-day ceasefire earlier this week. Shannon?
All right, Jennifer Griffin live from the Pentagon. Thank you very much. A tech company says Singapore was the top target for cyber attacks earlier this week, as President Trump was there for his historic summit with Kim Jong-un. 5 networks say the country was the target of about 40,000 attacks between Monday and Tuesday. The hackers targeted hotels and other businesses all over the island. The experts say about 88% of them came from Russian IP addresses. Still unclear how many attacks were successful and what information may have been compromised. Controversy over detention centers for illegal children, separating them from their parents. The feds are considering more sites. We are live in Dallas with details on that report. Plus, lawmakers have some big votes next week. We're going to tell you what they're doing to change the immigration laws, if anything.
Religious leaders have come out and said that this is inhumane. Do you agree?
We don't want kids to be separated from their parents. I think I just made that really clear. And we believe because of the court ruling, this will require legislative change.
Military bases in Texas to shelter children caught crossing the border illegally, even if some were seeking asylum, like many have done in recent years, as gang violence increases in parts of Central America. Casey Stegall is live in Dallas to bring us more. Hi, Casey.
Hey, Shannon, and the Department of Health and Human Services confirming to Fox that a new location to house immigrant children has in fact been selected. It's not military, more on that in a moment, but this is in Tornillo, Texas, the port of entry there. Look at the map, very far east out near El Paso, in a newly announced spot that will soon accommodate up to 360 children in the next few days. It's 796 miles from Brownsville, Texas, out west. You see essentially there on the other end of the Texas's shared border with Mexico. Well, here is video given to us by HHS because media have not been widely let inside this giant former Walmart store here in Brownsville turned child housing facility filled with about 1,400 boys. All of the unaccompanied minors here are those who the feds say broke the law by crossing into the U.S. illegally, usually with a family member or parent. That's where this controversial zero tolerance policy comes up that we're hearing a lot about, separating kids from their parents because adults are now being sent straight into the justice system. U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has said it is about enforcing the law and not being, quote, mean to children. But a growing number of people and groups have denounced the sudden enforcement, including now medical professionals like the American College of Physicians and the American Psychological Association, who are now saying that the trauma and fear these children are experiencing, regardless of nationality, translates into both medical and mental problems for these people for life.
It is really un-American to weaponize children to stop unlawful immigration. Using the separation of children from parents as a threat to deter immigration is harmful and inexcusable.
And now, Fort Bliss and 2 other military installations here in the Lone Star State also being considered now for additional temporary housing units. That also from HHS. But we have not been able to get a clear answer on whether some of these new detention facilities will actually be more like tent cities, not actual structures like we've seen at that Walmart supercenter, but tents. An HHS spokesperson saying some will be soft-sided structures with air conditioning, but wouldn't elaborate any further. Shannon?
All right, Casey Stegall for us live in Dallas. Thank you.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, House Republicans going back to the drawing board as they consider 2 immigration bills after President Trump said this.
I'm looking at both of them. I certainly wouldn't sign the more moderate.
What does the bill have to have in it?
I need a bill that gives this country tremendous border security. I have to have that. We have to get rid of catch and release.
Does that mean the wall?
We have to have the wall. If we don't have the wall, there's no bill.
Let's talk about it with David Goodfriend, a former staff secretary to President Bill Clinton. Liam Donovan is a National Review commentator. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about what's in this so-called compromise immigration bill from the GOP, because they're working on 2 things. They have the Goodlatte bill, which is considered more conservative. So this is what's in. A path to citizenship for dreamers, $25 billion for the border wall. It ends the diversity visa lottery system and limits chain migration. Now, David, not only is the president not a fan of this and says he's not going to vote for it, a number of lawmakers are saying, well, we need to fully brief him, let him see what's in it. I think he'll like it once he knows. Democrats hate it. They say that this thing is way too conservative. So it sounds like it would have no chance either way, because you've got to have Democrat votes in the Senate to move things.
Yeah, well, if you look at the story that we just saw in your network about what's going on at the border, a major issue now is the separation of children from families. And in fact, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Texas just this morning said on a national newscast, the law does not require the separation of children from their parents. That's a policy decision by the Trump administration. So any legislation that Congress considers that fails to address that crisis that the Trump administration, I would argue, has created is not going to win Democratic votes. It's probably not going to win some Republican votes. There are plenty of Republicans who are up for re-election right now who have to rely on Latino voters in their states where the border issues are major issues and feel that it's just un-American to separate children from families, as you heard described by that physician.
And that's one of the things that I think is motivating everybody on the Hill to actually, because they see this and they know that it's heartbreaking. The president was asked about it this morning. He said repeatedly, I hate it. I hate it. He's saying this isn't something that should be happening either. But Liam, he says, we need Democrats to come to the table with us so we can solve this. So who's at fault? Is everybody at fault?
Well, I think this just goes to show you what the dynamic is that's very tricky. Republicans have about a 10% of their conference, 30 members or so, for whom any solution is really important for them to get. The other 10% probably aren't going to be for any solution. The rest need cover from the president for anything they're going to do. I don't know that there's a solution that gets 218 votes among Republicans alone, so a bipartisan solution is going to have to be where this goes ultimately if they want to solve the problem.
Yeah, because getting the 218 in the House and then getting to the Senate where you got to have 60, which means you got to have Democrats vote with you there, and then for it all to be together something that will get to the president and he'll actually sign it. I mean, it seems like this is a really tough needle to thread.
It is, and what's fascinating to me, I mean, I'm an outside observer when it comes to the Republican caucus. There is, as you just heard described, significant division within the Republican caucus. I mean, forget about winning Democratic votes for a second. Could you get a majority of Republicans in the House or a majority in the Senate around any proposal? That's my first question. As much as I'd like to argue that Democrats are necessary for everything, we're not. Can the Republicans coalesce around a solution that then you could bring just a few Democrats along? You don't need all of them. That still seems elusive. And I think one of the reasons why Speaker Ryan has had such a devil of a time with this is that he's wanted to pull together parts of his own caucus and has failed to do so. We'll see when these open voting patterns start. Like, they're going to put the bills out for a vote. We'll see. You know, you never know until there's a vote.
Exactly.
But I think there's going to be an awful lot of tension within the Republican caucus for all the reasons Liam just described before you can even get to whether or not Democrats can be brought on board.
Many hurdles. All right, here is what House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, of course the top Democrat in the House, is saying about this.
This is the first time in this era that we have had a president that has rejected newcomers to our country.
Now, Liam, a lot of people will say that's not fair. He's not rejecting people coming here legally. It sounds like, is there any way to make this less divisive and less partisan so there can be a solution?
Well, I think part of the issue is Congress doesn't do comprehensive very well. They need to keep it narrow, keep it simple, come up with a border solution and a DACA solution, and that's the only way you don't get into tripping other things that end up, to build a coalition that gets to 218, that gets to 60 in the Senate, you need to keep it simple.
Yeah, it feels like one of those moments from years and decades ago when you'd have like a Tip O'Neill and a Ronnie Reagan and try to sit down and hammer this thing out. It doesn't seem like we have a lot of people right now on the Hill who have those kinds of relationships because everybody agrees what we saw in that story is not okay and they want a solution. The tough thing is, how do we get there? But you would think and hope that good men and women of the Hill will rise up and figure this out.
I'd like to think that the supermajority of senators, Democrats and Republicans alike, who first passed immigration reform, this is a couple Congresses ago, but they did it. I'd like to think that that bodes well for a similar vehicle coming together this time. What stopped it then was the Freedom Caucus in the House. And that's, I think, what's stopping it now as well. But I'd like to think there's still room for bipartisanship on this issue.
Too quickly, we're out of time. Okay, all right. Well, we'll just say, though, that the president has campaigned very clearly that he wouldn't have anything to do with amnesty and he was going to take care of this problem. So he has to think about his base, and the Freedom Caucus is thinking about their base who sent them there as well and the promises they made. All right, David Goodfriend and Liam Donovan, thank you both. Have a great weekend.
You too.
All right, the Supreme Court set to issue several rulings Monday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern. Who's counting? I am. Our panel is going to break down those closely watched cases we're still waiting for, plus fans around the globe lining up for World Cup action. Ahead, how fans in this country are reacting. Even though the U.S. didn't qualify this year, we're still interested.
I'm Trace Gallagher in for Shep. A wild morning at the White House. President Trump speaking on a bunch of topics, including the Russia investigation, North Korea, and his former fixer, Michael Cohen. I'll speak with a lawyer who says there's a clue that could indicate which way Cohen will go. The president also weighing in on his former campaign chairman, who is now heading to jail. That's coming up on Shepard Smith Reporting.
Well, the Supreme Court set to hand down some more opinions on Monday morning. There are several key rulings we are waiting on before they end their term in just a couple of weeks. For some of the cases that we are going to talk about, we're joined now by Elizabeth Wydra from the Constitutional Accountability Center and Carrie Severino from the Judicial Crisis Network. Two of our favorite SCOTUS watchers. Great to have both of you here today.
Always great to be here.
Okay, so Monday, we never know what we're going to get, but we're waiting. One of the biggest cases, the last one they heard argued, was the travel ban. Carrie, what are you watching for?
Yeah, the travel ban is going to be a big one. One that I'm curious about, just finally to get it off the table, is Janus case. That was public employee unions, and it was set to be practically decided right when Justice Scalia died in 2016. It seemed clear they were going to overrule a 47-year-old case that said that public employees could be forced to subsidize unions, and they said this is violating our First Amendment rights because this is basically political speech. And so I think the court, it looks like, will finally get around to overruling that case and kind of finish the last work of the 2016 cases.
And if I'm right about that, is that one of the cases where Justice Gorsuch, the newest member of the bench, didn't say anything? Yeah. He made zero comments, and everybody, of course, is watching him. But again, this is a public school teacher in California who says he doesn't want to have to pay towards the union dues or fees because he may not always agree with their political activities and those kinds of things. But Elizabeth, the courts have always been worried, too, about free riders or people who get the benefits of being in the union even though they don't pay into it.
Right, exactly. So the existing system now, you don't have to join a union. You don't have to subsidize the political activities, the legislative lobbying, et cetera. But you do have to pay a fair share fee that covers collective bargaining that benefits everyone, whether it's workplace safety, making sure that there's not wage theft, that there are fair pay conditions. So that's really what a lot of the states are fighting to keep. And in fact, my organization, CAC, filed a brief on behalf of Republican state legislators who say, look, this is an issue of federalism. It's really our decision how to interact with our public sector employees.
All right, so we're going to watch for that one. Also, I don't know about you ladies, but I like to internet shop. In fact, that's almost how I do all of my shopping, even for groceries, for clothes, for anything. It's so easy, but there's a big case out there involving Wayfair, a very popular home goods site, where we're going to find out something potentially about internet taxes, which would impact just about everybody.
Yeah, and this is a huge case because it has to do with whether states can charge their state taxes to those companies. You know, Amazon tends to often have to pay in-state taxes, but you have groups like Wayfair, or there's a lot of other companies that don't. And this is something also that Justice Gorsuch had written on even before he was on the court, suggesting that there were some issues with the way that we're analyzing. So it's going to be really interesting because it could have a huge impact. And I think that's what the justices are scared of, is like they don't really, they're hoping to decide a case, a point of law, but not to overhaul an entire industry. It's just, you know, you're at the Supreme Court. Sometimes the decisions have huge impacts.
Well, my husband is hoping it might slow down my internet shopping. Elizabeth, I'm going to have it regardless of the outcome of the case. But what other ones are you watching for? I feel like we have several. I mean, there's also the one about police using cell tower information to track people without getting a warrant, the Carpenter case.
Right, which is an important case of privacy in the digital age, whether or not you need a warrant before using that cell phone tower data that can pinpoint your location. But I think that the two most important cases that I'm looking for are the partisan gerrymandering cases, which are about whether or not you can draw districts such that you're so likely to get a person elected of a particular party, basically allowing politicians to choose their voters rather than the other way around. And of course, as you mentioned, the Trump Muslim travel ban case. I think we really in this moment are particularly focused on this. You know, we're dealing with the horror we see every day of the Trump administration's policy of tearing families apart at the border. And so everyone is going to be looking very closely to see whether or not the Supreme Court strikes this down as being the unconstitutional and unlawful program that it is, that harms families, refugees, and people wanting to come here to build a better life for themselves.
And you know, of course, the White House does not call it a Muslim ban. Venezuela, North Korea, there were other countries that have been involved, and it doesn't target the most populous Muslim countries, but there are certainly some countries on this list that we have concerns about whether we can verify data before people can come in for immigration. This is now Travel Ban 3.0. This is the third version, and it has a lot to say about executive power, what the court decides.
Yeah, and I think when we look look at what the court has said about the previous versions, there's no question in my mind that the court is going to find this absolutely constitutional, because this is well, look, even the previous versions, which didn't have as much analysis gone into it yet, the government hadn't made the analysis yet of the ability of those countries to guarantee that these people who are who they say they are. The court looked like they were ready, even many of the liberal justices, to uphold those ones. The president has a huge amount of authority when it comes to national security, and that's simply what's the case here. So
yeah,
I know there's.
I don't think the justices were really on. You know, he has authority, but it's cabined by the Constitution and other statutes.
We do. In this case, it's pretty clear.
One thing we can all agree on: we love our Constitution.
Yes.
Amen. All right, we'll leave it there. Okay, Elizabeth Wajda, Carrie Severino. I'll see you at the court on Monday. Thank you. All right, Tom Brady talking about the anthem protest by NFL players in a new interview with Oprah. We're going to tell you what he's saying. Plus, World Cup fever hitting up several teams, heating up as they take to the pitch today. How are the fans responding, Jonathan Hunt?
They're having a ball, Shannon. The biggest game so far at the biggest sporting event in the world is underway. Bars across America are packed. We'll take you inside and give you your World Cup weekend schedule after the break.
Tom Brady speaking out on NFL players kneeling during the national anthem. The Patriots star quarterback stood arm in arm with teammates before a game last season while other players took a knee. Brady saying he understands where his teammates come from.
I've been in it for a long time. I've been with guys from all different parts of the country, every color, race, belief, background. And you know what? You respect what other people. You know, I do. I respect why people are doing what they're doing, and they're doing it for different reasons.
That interview airs Sunday on Oprah's OWN network. All right, World Cup fever heating up. Already there have been some dramatic wins, both Uruguay and Iran pulling through with lone goal victories. Right now, Spain and Portugal are going head-to-head. Jonathan Hunt is with fans in Santa Monica. All right, Jonathan, tell us, this Portugal-Spain game, is that the highlight of the first round?
Oh, absolutely. This is a real highlight of the first round. We're here at the legendary sports bar, the King's Head in Santa Monica, and as you can see, it is absolutely packed for what is the best game by far so far in this World Cup. 2-1 at halftime to Portugal over Spain. Now, in the natural order of things, Spain you would consider the better team all around, but when Ronaldo is playing, one of the great stars of this sport, he plays for Portugal. The natural order tends to get turned on its head. That is what has happened so far in this game. Ronaldo with 2 goals to put Portugal 2-1 up at the half. Now, as for the games to come, they're all on Fox Sports, of course. This is what you want to do over the weekend. You should just sit on the couch, watch them all. If you've got to run some errands, here's your can't miss games. France, Australia, first on Saturday. France, one of the teams likely to be in the mix at the very end of this tournament. Then, mighty Argentina, one of the powerhouses of soccer, against tiny Iceland. It's kind of like the Yankees playing the Wichita Wingnuts in the World Series. Then Sunday, Germany, reigning world champions, up against Mexico. That'll be an extraordinary game. And then also Brazil. One of those, I think, will be in the final. Germany and Brazil could be the final itself. Brazil plays Switzerland on Sunday. Nobody plays the beautiful game more beautifully than Brazil when they're on song. And that is my prediction, in fact, for the final. It'll end up in a month's time, Shannon, being Brazil against Germany. I'd like to say that Brazil will win it all because they play such great soccer. Sadly, I think that far away from home in Russia, Brazil might diminish a little bit and the efficiency of the Germans might win out. I say that with a very heavy heart as an Englishman, Shannon.
Well, I spent a summer in Brazil. They are beautiful, fantastic people and amazing soccer players. And I like that you worked Wingnuts
Shannon,
into that report.
I'm not hearing you in here. It's really loud. I'm not sure what you say. Just watch every game. It's all on Fox Sports. Don't miss a minute. Don't leave the couch this weekend.
That's right. It sounds like a good plan. Just relax and watch FIFA. All right. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Well, Canine Companions puppy Spike is working hard in the control room in New York. Look at him. He's so cute. He's going to introduce you to some of his friends. He's so well behaved, too. That's next. Jennifer Williams and Canine Companions puppy Spike meeting some new friends this past weekend while enjoying a beverage.
Spike and I are at Old York Cellars. It's a winery out in New Jersey, and we're having a